Well, the Federal Reserve is drawing quite a bit of attention these days with any potential decisions around interest rates, the recent Jackson Hole symposium, and the question of the Fed's independence. Pleasure to have joining us to talk about all of those topics Patrick Harker, who's former Philadelphia Federal Reserve president, former Wharton School dean, and back at Wharton as a professor of operations, information, and decisions, as well as director of academic engagement at Penn Washington. Pat, great to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So you were out in Jackson Hole. So give
Yeah.
us your sense of everything that went on there, and obviously the comments by Chair Powell after the symposium was completed.
So I think there's some short run and long run feelings that I take away from Jackson Hole. In the short run, there are clearly the chair did signal openness to a September cut. Personally, I'm a little skeptical about that. I think that the data is very mixed, kind of feels a little like stagflation light is upon us. Now, I hope that's not the case. It's not the 1970s. Let's be clear, right? We're not talking about that kind of stagflation, but inflation's running above target. It just seems to be stuck there, maybe even drifting up. Unemployment is hanging in there. We're not seeing any real move there. Quits are easing some, so people clearly feel a little jittery. On the consumer side, the Philly Fed just put out its most recent life survey. This is a survey we started when I was there, the Labor, Finances, and Expectation Survey of consumers across the country. And it wasn't great. Net optimism is down. There's clearly people who are either cutting back on discretionary spending. Some are cutting back on spending they have to do. And they're skipping payments increasingly. The sentiment is the lowest it's been for quite a while, actually since the inception of the survey. So there's a funk, I would say, use a technical phrase, right? There's a funk that's settling in that's disturbing.
Yeah, and so from that perspective, does it make you think that, is there a rate cut probably more in line in the near future? And I'll keep that wide. Near future doesn't necessarily have to be September, but at least sometime by the end of this year because of some of those dynamics you see.
So my last SEP, which was June, the dot plot, the Survey of Economic Projections, I had two rate cuts in for this year. I still think that's probably right. So we need to start easing down. The other part that isn't getting a lot of attention, the Fed did slow the reduction in the size of the balance sheet on purpose. Yeah. I would be in the camp of just stopping the reduction altogether right now. Just sit there for a while and go flat in terms of the size. Liabilities will eventually build up and drain reserves more. So I think there's some things they could do, but dramatic cuts right now don't seem in the forecast. I just don't see it.
Where do you think that target number is then for the Fed? And obviously, some of this is still a moving target because of the dynamics in the economy. But I think a lot of people have a belief of, if we see the Fed eventually, and it may be over a 2-year window in that 3 to 3.5% range, that maybe that ends up being the target.
Yeah. So it all depends on where you think the R star is, right? The real rate, the neutral real rate. And there's wide divergence of opinion in the economics profession and on the street about that. Some of it's betting on productivity gains from AI, and that's possible. Others are more pessimistic, thinking it's still hovering around 0.5 to 1%. So if you're in that camp, then you're looking at a neutral rate, a nominal rate of the Fed funds rate of 3.5. Roughly.
What do you think are the areas that obviously the leaders of the Fed, the governors will be focusing on, but for us on the outside, because it seems like business news and business data is more on our fingertips than ever before. Right. But what are some of the areas that we should be kind of keeping our own eyes on?
So this gets to my second point. It is a point that may sound heretical, and so I should be clear, but stop obsessing about 25 basis points up or down with the Fed funds rate. I understand bond traders, this is your business, this is how you make a living, but the problems we have in the economy are not the Fed. The problem is not the Fed. The Fed knows what it's doing. It will make mistakes, sure. We make mistakes from time to time. But that's not where the real action is. And by the way, moving the Fed funds rate is not going to move the rates that Americans care about, right? Credit card rates, mortgage rates, and so forth. In fact, if you look, that since November, the 30-year rate's gone up, what, 32-ish, over 32 basis points. The 10-year's been flat. And given how much supply we're going to be putting into the market with the deficit spending, why would you expect the long rates to come down anytime soon unless you see a big surge in demand, which I don't see? So, you know, the administration can ask all they want for the rates to come down, but the Fed doesn't control the long end of the yield curve, the end that people care about. And why is that the case? Well, there are broader economic issues that I'm concerned about. One of the themes of the Jackson Hole meeting was our fertility rate and the issue of,
Yeah.
will we have the labor force? We're not replacing ourselves. We are going down in terms of the size of the labor force because with immigration, net immigration turning negative. Now, I'm not commenting on whether that's a good idea or bad idea socially, but economically, it's not a good idea.
Right.
We are going to, and our friend Ken Smetters in the Penn Wharton budget model has done an analysis of this. It's just not moving the needle in the right direction with where we are with economic policy.
Before I let you go, I did want to broach the topic of Fed independence, which is obviously on a lot of people's
Yeah.
minds right now. With all that we have seen going on, the back and forth between the White House and the Fed, how are you viewing what we are seeing play out right now?
Oh, it's dangerous. Very, very dangerous for the country. There's never been a case where breaching the independence of the bank over the long run, the central bank, ours or anywhere in the world, has turned out well. It just doesn't happen. When political interference gets into the business of the central bank, who has to do things that people don't like from time to time, like raise rates, that it puts us in a dangerous position. Now, that said, the Fed, every central bank has to earn the right to be independent. It's not something that we just take for granted. And we
Right.
earn that right by doing our job all the time. And also, I put this in a Wall Street Journal piece recently. The independence is also incumbent upon the American people realizing what the Fed can do and what it can't do. Often, because of some dysfunction we see in other parts of government, the Fed is asked to do things it simply is not legally allowed to do and frankly can't do. For example, we could move the long end of the yield curve if we went into a quantitative easing cycle. But we only do that in an emergency. And it's hard to
Right.
argue we're in an emergency right now. So
Right.
be clear on what the Fed can do, but also be clear on what the Fed can't do. So when you criticize the Fed, you may not be criticizing the Fed. You may be criticizing conditions that you think the Fed can solve, but it's not designed to solve those.
Pat, always great insight, and obviously great to have you back at Wharton. All the
Thanks.
best, and look forward to talking to you in the months ahead.
See you, Dan.
Thank you. Pat Harker, former Philadelphia Federal Reserve president, former Wharton School dean, and currently professor of operations, information, and decisions here at the Wharton School.